forward to hearing from the witnesses today. Hope that we can continue to try to find a way to protect our nation that recognizes, even though that we're at war, we must operate within the bounds of the laws and the treaties that make our nation strong. As to you, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the willingness to cooperate. I think the country has been well served by these hearings, and that we have learned from our mistakes and we've made adjustments accordingly. In that regard, the Congress has fulfilled its obligations under the Constitution and made us a stronger nation.
Thank you very much, Senator Graham, and your experience as a military lawyer is an invaluable resource for this committee and for the country. And we're very, very grateful for you and for it. Our first panel today consists of Mr. Richard Schifrin, who's the former Deputy General Counsel for Intelligence at the Department of Defense, retired Lieutenant Colonel Dan Baumgartner, who is the former Chief of Staff of the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, JPRA, and Dr. Jerry Ogrisseg, former Chief of Psychology Services at the U.S. Air Force Survival School. And I think, Mr. Schifrin, that you are going to go first, followed by Mr. Baumgartner, and then Dr. Ogrisseg. If you have opening statements, we would welcome them at this time. Mr. Schifrin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I do not have an opening statement. I am here to answer questions of the committee and will do my best to recall events that occurred 5 or 6 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Schifrin. And next we would call upon retired Lieutenant Colonel Dan Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an opening statement. Chairman Levin, Senator Graham, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for providing me the opportunity at this hearing to answer the questions the committee may have relative to interrogation techniques for use with detainees in U.S. custody. I am currently the Acting Director and Senior Analyst Personnel Recovery Policy in the Defense Prisoner of War Missing Personnel Office, Personnel Recovery Policy Directorate, Office of the Secretary of Defense. I served on active duty as an officer in the United States Air Force from 1979 to 2003. In 1990, I was assigned to the Air Force Survival School. From then until my retirement ceremony in March 2003, I served in a variety of capacities involving the Department of Defense Personnel Recovery Mission. My final assignment from 1998 until May of 2003 was as the Chief of Staff to the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, also referred to by its acronym JPRA. The JPRA is the United States Joint Forces Command's Office of Primary Responsibility for the Department of Defense Personnel Recovery Mission. Personnel Recovery Mission involves a sum of military, civil, and diplomatic efforts to prepare for and execute the recovery and reintegration of captured, detained, isolated, or missing United States personnel who become separated from their organization while participating in a U.S.-sponsored military activity or mission outside of the U.S. and who are or may be in a situation where they may be isolated, beleaguered, detained, captured, or having to evade, resist, or escape. In accordance with the committee's specific request, I provided written testimony about my recollection of any assistance to interrogators provided by JPRA personnel. The JPRA commander at the time, my boss, Colonel Randy Moulton, had prohibited JPRA personnel from becoming involved in actual interrogations of detainees, and as far as I know, JPRA personnel did not participate in detainee interrogations at any time prior to my retirement. In late 2001, or possibly early 2002, intelligence came to JPRA's attention that might apply to detainee questioning. We shared the information with the Defense Intelligence Agency because their strategic debriefers would most likely be called upon for detainee questioning. DIA accepted our offer to provide briefings to a couple of their deploying groups. I myself did not provide any briefings to DIA personally, but I believe the DIA groups received briefings centered on resistance techniques, question techniques, and general information how exploitation works. I was also personally provided a 30-minute briefing to the Criminal Investigation Task Force located at Fort Belvoir, which worked under the Undersecretary of the Army. This briefing occurred in 2002. I provided information on resistance techniques, questioning techniques, and general information on how exploitation works, and also JPRA's mission and role in the department. We also briefed one other agency. In addition to this assistance, in approximately mid-2002, Army Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Morgan Banks, the Director of Psychological Services at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, requested that JPRA personnel travel to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to provide briefings to Army psychologists and other mental health personnel. That briefing occurred in September of 2002. I coordinated the support in terms of scheduling and obligating the JPRA to respond to Dr. Banks' requests. The briefings were designed to assist the Army in training Army psychologists and other mental health personnel on what it would mean to be assigned to duty at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. To my best recollection, the course had instruction in exploitation, oversight and treatment of detainees and staff in a captivity environment, and what the professional ethical issues might be for clinical psychologists operating in a captivity environment. I also provided written testimony of my recollection of my communications with the Office of the General Counsel of the Department of Defense. Although I have no personal recollection, I understand from review of the documents that in December 2001, JPRA provided the Office of the General Counsel information involving the exploitation process and historical information on captivity and lessons learned. That request came from Mr. Richard Schifrin. I do recall that in July 2002, Mr. Schifrin requested information from the JPRA about interrogation techniques used against the United States prisoner of war. In response to this request, I provided some papers on exploitation, interrogation, and lesson plans used to train our U.S. personnel in the psychological aspects of detention, exploitation, threats and pressures, methods of interrogation, and resistance to interrogations. After a follow-up request for the use of physical pressures, I provided that additional information, which consisted of the use of physical pressures in our personnel recovery training with information compiled from JPRA experts and one paper from the Air Force SEER school psychologist, Captain and Dr. Jerry Ogrisseg on the effects of resistance training. I followed up with one or two more phone calls to make sure I had provided the information requested to the Office of the General Counsel. I do not recall any further communications with the Office of General Counsel about these issues after the summer of 2002. I thank the committee for allowing me to provide an opening statement and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ogrisseg. Or Dr. Ogrisseg, excuse me.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to appear before you today. Before testifying, I want to provide some background information about me. I received my Bachelor's of Science degree from The Ohio State University and my Master's and PhD degrees in Clinical Psychology from Bowling Green State University in Ohio. I joined the Air Force in 1995, and I went through residency training in psychology at Wilford Hall Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. I then served as a clinical psychologist in Air Force behavioral health clinics at Lackland Air Force Base and Onizuka Air Station in California. In those positions, I provided a wide range of basic psychological services. I then served as the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, known as SEER, psychologist for the United States Air Force Survival School at Fairchild Air Force Base, Washington, from the 4th of February 1999 to 28 July 2002. There, I was the commander's representative for all psychological aspects of training. My primary purpose was to safeguard the integrity of the training by providing risk management oversight of training activities and to conduct research to address questions of training effectiveness and training risk. I separated from active duty service at the grade of Major in 2002 to accept a civilian position with the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency. I serve currently as the SEER research psychologist for the JPRA, where I've been assigned since the 29th of July 2002. In that capacity, my job is to conduct research, conduct operational release handling of recovered, returned, and repatriated U.S. personnel, and recommend policies in these areas. I also provide expert knowledge in human decision-making, behavioral adaptation, learning in stressful environments, learned helplessness, and learning to enhance human resiliency. I chair an international research panel on survival psychology through the Human Resources and Performance Group, HUM, of the Technical Cooperation Program, which includes fellow survival psychologists from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to answering any questions you have.
Okay, let's start with a 8-minute round. Let me start with you first, Mr. Schifrin. When you were the Deputy General Counsel for Intelligence, for the Department of Defense. I understand you had some discussions with the Department of Defense General Counsel Jim Haynes about interrogations in the spring or summer of 2002. Is that correct?